The Arena of Horrors. The Droven Colosseum reeked of blood and sweat, its towering walls carved from obsidian and bone. Thousands of alien spectators filled the stands, creatures with too many eyes, mandibles that clicked hungrily, and tentacles that writhed with anticipation. They had come to witness an execution, but not just any execution. Today, the mighty Droven Empire would erase their greatest humiliation. In the center of the arena stood Champion Vorthak, a mountain of muscle and bronze armor. His double-headed battle axe gleamed under the flickering torches as he prepared to deliver the killing blow. But his target wasn't some fierce warrior or political prisoner. It was a kitten. The small creature sat calmly on the blood-stained sand, its silver fur pristine despite the chaos around it. Enormous blue eyes surveyed the roaring crowd with what could only be described as mild annoyance. A delicate chain connected its tiny collar to the champion's massive gauntlet, more for show than restraint. This was Specimen 626, the last surviving Felidar in the known galaxy. The crowd's bloodthirsty cheers echoed off the arena walls as Champion Vorthak raised his axe. The Felidar species had nearly brought the Droven Empire to its knees, not through military might or advanced technology, but through something far more insidious, their overwhelming cuteness. Entire fleets had been paralyzed when soldiers refused to fire on targets they instinctively wanted to protect and cuddle. The breaking point came when Emperor Zareth himself was caught on camera cradling a Felidar while cooing, "Who's the most precious little destroyer of worlds?" The footage went viral across the galaxy, and the Emperor's reputation as a ruthless warlord was shattered overnight. From the shadows of a support pillar, Captain Elias Trent watched the spectacle unfold. The human mercenary had seen plenty of injustice in his travels, but this felt different. Something about the tiny creature's defiant dignity stirred something deep in his chest. "This is insane," crackled Lieutenant Vasquez's voice through his earpiece. "Even for you, Elias." "Insanity is subjective," he murmured, checking his plasma rifle's charge. "Besides, no one explicitly forbade me from rescuing adorable alien war criminals. That's because no one thought they needed to." The champion's axe began its descent. Time seemed to slow as Elias made his decision. With a grunt of effort, he vaulted over the arena railing and dropped into the pit. The crowd fell silent. Champion Vorthak's axe froze mid-swing. Even the kitten tilted its head slightly, as if curious about this new development. Elias hit the sand hard, rolled with unnecessary flair, and rose to his feet with his blaster drawn. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted nightmare creatures," he announced loudly, "I'm here for the cat." The arena erupted. Some spectators laughed, others roared in confusion, but most simply waited to see this foolish human torn apart. Champion Vorthak let out a bellowing war cry and brought his axe down in a devastating arc. Elias dove aside, sand exploding where he'd been standing. The champion was fast for something the size of a building, but Elias was faster. He squeezed off a shot that caught the champion square in the face. The blast barely scratched the ornate helmet, but it certainly got his attention. With a snarl of rage, Vorthak swung again. Elias rolled between the giant's legs and slashed the chain holding the kitten with his plasma knife. The tiny creature was free. "Hi," Elias said, scooping up the kitten. "We're leaving." The kitten said nothing. It was, after all, a cat. A massive fist caught Elias across the ribs, sending him sprawling. He heard something crack as he hit the ground, the kitten landing gracefully beside him. Pain shot through his side, but he forced himself upright just as the champion raised his axe for the final blow. Then the kitten purred. It was barely audible over the crowd's roar, but somehow it carried, a soft, gentle sound that seemed to reach into the deepest parts of every listener's mind. Champion Vorthak hesitated. His grip on the axe loosened. Around the arena, thousands of bloodthirsty aliens felt an overwhelming urge to protect this tiny, perfect creature. Elias didn't waste the opportunity. He grabbed the still purring kitten and sprinted for the nearest exit as alarms began to wail throughout the complex. Behind him, Champion Vorthak shook his massive head, trying to clear it of the strange compulsion. But it was too late. The human and the last Felidar were already gone, disappearing into the labyrinthine corridors beneath the arena. The hunt was about to begin. The desperate escape. Elias ran through the underground corridors like a man possessed, his boots echoing off the metal walls as sirens wailed behind him. The kitten remained nestled against his chest, purring contentedly as if they were taking a pleasant stroll rather than fleeing for their lives. Not helping, he muttered between ragged breaths. His earpiece crackled to life. "Elias, you magnificent idiot," Vasquez's voice was equal parts exasperated and impressed. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? Rescued the galaxy's most dangerous emotional support animal," he gasped, skidding around a corner. "You've publicly humiliated the Droven Empire. Their entire sector fleet is mobilizing. Every bounty hunter in 3 systems will be after you within the hour. Wouldn't be the first time." Elias ducked into a service tunnel, the cold air burning his lungs. "Please tell me you have an extraction plan. Doc 7. There's a transport waiting, but... The Droven just locked it down." Of course they had. Elias pressed his back against the tunnel wall, trying to think. The security forces would be flooding these passages soon, and he was running out of places to hide. The kitten yawned and stretched, completely oblivious to their predicament. Heavy footsteps echoed from the corridor behind him, multiple sets, moving with military precision. Elias peered around the corner and his heart sank. 6 Droven enforcers in obsidian armor were advancing methodically, their visors glowing with lethal intent. He was trapped. "Trent of Earth," one of them called, his voice a mechanical rumble. "You are charged with crimes against the Droven Empire. Surrender the Felidar and we will grant you a swift execution." "How generous," Elias called back, his mind racing for options. "The alternative is not swift." Elias looked down at the kitten, who gazed back with those impossibly large blue eyes. An insane idea began to form. "All right," he shouted. "I surrender." The enforcers hesitated. This wasn't the usual response they received. Slowly, Elias stepped into view, hands raised. "Weapon down," the lead enforcer commanded. Elias carefully placed his blaster on the floor, then knelt and gently set the kitten down beside it. The enforcers tensed, but he made no sudden moves. "There," he said quietly. "But before you kill me, I want you to look at something." The kitten took a single step forward. The first enforcer made a tiny choking sound. The second dropped his weapon entirely. The third, a battle-hardened veteran who had once torn a battle mech apart with his bare hands, whispered, so small, in a voice filled with wonder. The kitten blinked, a slow, deliberate blink that seemed to shatter something fundamental in the enforcer's programming. "Protect the precious," one of them sobbed, falling to his knees. "Must keep safe," another whimpered, his massive frame trembling. All 6 enforcers collapsed into helpless, protective heaps around the tiny creature. The kitten sat primly in the center of them, tail swishing with what Elias could swear was satisfaction. He grabbed his blaster and the kitten, then bolted for the surface. Behind him, he could hear the enforcers weeping and making tiny cooing noises. The spaceport was a nightmare of activity when he finally reached it. Droven troops, battle mechs, and hovering drones filled every inch of the facility. It looked like the entire planetary garrison had been deployed to ensure one specific human didn't escape. "New plan," he told Vasquez through the comm. "Good, because Doc 7 is completely surrounded." Elias studied the overwhelming force arrayed against him. Energy shields hummed, targeting lasers swept the area, and at least 2 orbital strike platforms had locked onto his position. "We're going to do something very stupid," he announced. "That's not a plan, that's your default setting." He looked down at the kitten. The kitten looked back, ears twitching. "I hope you know how much trouble you're causing," he muttered. The kitten sneezed. A massive figure stepped forward from the Droven ranks, a towering warlord in ceremonial armor so ornate it looked like it could collapse under its own weight. "Trent of Earth," the warlord's voice boomed across the spaceport. You have brought disgrace upon the Empire. Surrender now, and we may grant you the mercy of a swift death. Elias raised the kitten high above his head. The entire army flinched. Somewhere in the back ranks, a Droven soldier let out a muffled sob. That's what I thought, Elias grinned. But his victory was short-lived. The warlord slowly removed his helmet, revealing features that made Elias's blood run cold. The face was Droven, but the eyes were human. Did you really think, the warlord said softly, that you were the first human to defy the Empire? The hunter becomes the hunted. The warlord's face haunted Elias as he stared at the impossible sight before him. Human features on a Droven body, eyes that held too much knowledge and too much pain. What's your name? Elias asked, his voice barely audible over the humming of weapons systems. The warlord hesitated, and when he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Marcus. Marcus Chen. I was a terraforming engineer before. He gestured at his transformed body. Before I learned what the Felidar really are. The kitten in Elias's arms purred louder, and Marcus flinched as if struck. Tell me, Trent, Marcus continued, regaining his composure. How long have you been holding it? How often do you think about it when you're not carrying it? Elias's hands trembled. The truth was, he had been thinking about the kitten constantly. Even when he'd set it down to surrender to the enforcers, part of his mind had been focused on retrieving it. Are you certain, Marcus asked, stepping closer, that you can let go? Before Elias could answer, the sky began to change. Dark clouds swirled overhead, but they weren't natural. Something vast and alive was descending through the atmosphere, a shape so enormous it defied comprehension. Eyes the size of continents blinked down at the planet. Tendrils of light curled across the sky like cosmic tentacles. The Felidar homeworld had arrived. Now you understand, Marcus said softly. This isn't a rescue. It's an invasion. A sound began to emanate from above, a low, gentle purring that vibrated through the ground and into the bones of every living creature on the planet. But this wasn't the comforting sound Elias had heard before. This was something else entirely. Something that whispered directly into the deepest parts of the mind, you are safe now. Submit. Obey. Love. The Droven forces began to collapse. Hardened warriors dropped their weapons and curled into fetal positions. Battle-scarred veterans whimpered like lost children. The purring from above grew stronger, more insistent. The Felidar don't conquer with violence, Marcus shouted over the cosmic purring. They conquer with affection. They make you love them so completely that the thought of resistance becomes impossible. Elias looked down at the kitten in his arms. It gazed back with those enormous blue eyes, and for the first time, he saw something else there. Intelligence. Ancient, calculating intelligence. How many planets? He asked. Hundreds, Marcus replied. All willingly serving their adorable overlords. The Droven Empire was the last holdout, and now. He gestured at his troops, who were now making tiny mewing sounds as they reached helplessly toward the sky. The kitten's purr joined the cosmic symphony, and Elias felt his resolve beginning to weaken. It would be so easy to just give in, to let the warmth wash over him, to serve this perfect little creature forever. But something in Marcus's eyes, the desperate plea of a man who had lost everything to this seductive horror, gave him strength. With a grunt of effort that felt like tearing away part of his soul, Elias hurled the kitten as hard as he could. It sailed through the air in a perfect arc and landed squarely on Marcus's face. The effect was immediate and devastating. The former human collapsed instantly, his massive frame crumpling as he made tiny, helpless sounds of absolute devotion. The kitten clung to his helmet, purring with satisfaction. The cosmic presence above paused, as if confused by this unexpected development. In that moment of hesitation, Elias ran. The spaceport was chaos. Droven soldiers crawled on their hands and knees, mewing and reaching toward the sky. Battle mechs had shut down, their pilots overwhelmed by the need to cuddle something. In the midst of this madness, Elias spotted Salvation, a single-seat fighter that had been overlooked in the confusion. He dove into the cockpit, his hands flying over the controls with desperate efficiency. The engines roared to life just as the cosmic purring reached a crescendo. Through the canopy, he could see the massive presence above beginning to descend, preparing to complete its conquest of the planet. The fighter launched into the sky like a bullet, weaving between the tendrils of light that reached down from the Felidar homeworld. Laser fire from orbital platforms tried to track him, but the targeting systems were failing as their operators succumbed to the overwhelming compulsion to protect and serve. As he broke through the atmosphere, Elias allowed himself a moment of relief. He had escaped. The mission was over. He was free. But as he reached for the navigation controls, his blood ran cold. There, curled up on the dashboard with smug satisfaction, was a single strand of silver fur. His hand moved toward it almost automatically, the urge to pet it, to cherish it, overwhelming every rational thought. At the last second, he drew his sidearm and fired. The fur disintegrated in a tiny puff of smoke. "Not today," he whispered, his hands shaking. But even as he set course for neutral space, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The Felidar had revealed themselves, and now the galaxy would learn what true conquest looked like. Somewhere behind him, on the surface of the planet, Marcus Chen held the last Felidar close to his chest and whispered promises of eternal service. Above them, the homeworld settled into orbit, its ancient presence spreading across the system like a benevolent plague. The age of cuteness had begun. Revelations in the void. 3 days into the void of deep space, Elias thought he had finally found peace. The stars streamed past his viewport in gentle lines of light, and the hum of the ship's engines had become a comforting lullaby. No more Droven, no more mind-controlling kittens, no more cosmic horror masquerading as cute pets. He was wrong. The first sign of trouble was subtle, a soft scratching sound from the cargo hold. Elias froze at the navigation console, his coffee mug halfway to his lips. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He had checked the ship 17 times. He had scanned every inch with thermal imaging. He had even used a quantum detector to search for trace Felidar DNA. The ship was clean. The scratching came again, followed by a sound that made his blood turn to ice, a tiny, perfect mew. Elias drew his sidearm and crept toward the cargo hold. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing darkness and shadow. He stepped inside, weapon raised, breathing shallow. "I know you're in here," he called softly. "Might as well come out." A pair of glowing blue eyes appeared in the darkness, followed by a small silver form that seemed to materialize from nothing. The kitten sat primly on a supply crate, tail swishing with what could only be described as amusement. "How?" Elias demanded, his weapon trained on the tiny creature. "I threw you at Marcus. I watched you land on his face. I saw you cling to his helmet." The kitten tilted its head and began to groom its paw. "You're not the same one," Elias breathed, understanding dawning. "There are more of you." As if summoned by his words, more eyes began to appear in the shadows. 2 pairs, then 4, then 6. Small silver forms emerged from impossible hiding places, air vents, storage compartments, even what appeared to be solid walls. Elias backed toward the door, his weapon moving frantically between targets. "How many?" The original kitten, or the one he thought was original, mewed once. The sound was echoed by its companions, creating a chorus of overwhelming cuteness that made Elias's trigger finger freeze. His earpiece crackled to life. "Elias?" Vasquez's voice was tight with concern. "Your ship just appeared on our sensors. Where the hell have you been?" "Complications," he managed, still staring at the growing number of kittens. "Major complications. Well, you need to dock immediately. We're getting reports from across the sector." The Felidar homeworld isn't just conquering Droven space, it's moving toward the core systems. Entire fleets are going dark after broadcasting messages about serving the small ones. One of the kittens hopped down from its perch and approached Elias. His weapon hand trembled as it rubbed against his leg, purring. They're not trying to control me, he realized suddenly. They're trying to recruit me. What? Think about it, Elias said, his voice gaining strength as understanding crystallized. Marcus wasn't just a victim. He was a weapon. A human who could move freely among other humans, spreading the Felidar influence. They don't want to conquer us, they want us to conquer ourselves. The kitten at his feet looked up at him with those impossibly large eyes, and Elias saw the intelligence there again. Ancient. Patient. Utterly alien despite its adorable appearance. You're offering me a choice, he said to the creature. Serve willingly, or be replaced by someone who will. The kitten purred louder, and suddenly Elias could hear something else in the sound, a whisper at the edge of consciousness. Join us. Help us. Make the galaxy safe for all small, precious things. It was seductive. It was warm. It promised peace and purpose and an end to the endless struggles of existence. All he had to do was say yes. Instead, Elias smiled grimly and raised his weapon. Counteroffer. The kittens scattered as he opened fire, but they were fast, faster than any normal animal had a right to be. They flowed like liquid shadow, impossible to track, impossible to hit. Within seconds, they had vanished back into the ship's systems. But Elias wasn't trying to hit them. He was aiming for the ship's life support systems. Sparks flew as his shots found their marks. Warning lights flashed red as atmospheric processors began to fail. The ship's computer began announcing emergency protocols in a calm, mechanical voice. Elias, what are you doing? Vasquez's voice was sharp with alarm. Something very, very stupid, he replied, holstering his weapon and heading for the bridge. But it might just work. The kittens reappeared as the oxygen levels began to drop, their perfect features showing the first signs of distress. They mewed pitifully, their large eyes seeming to plead for help. Sorry, little ones, Elias said, pulling on an emergency breathing mask. But I'm not falling for it. He sealed himself in the bridge and activated the ship's emergency beacon. If he was right, if the Felidar were really as intelligent as he suspected, they would understand what he was doing. And they would have to make a choice. The kittens gathered outside the bridge door, their mewing growing more urgent as the air grew thin. Through the viewport, Elias could see rescue ships approaching, Vasquez's people, responding to his distress signal. The first kitten began to shimmer, its form becoming translucent. The others followed, their adorable facades dissolving to reveal something else entirely, beings of pure energy, ancient and vast, compressed into deceptively small forms. One of them spoke, its voice echoing directly in Elias's mind, "You would kill us to prevent our spread?" "If necessary," Elias replied aloud. "But I'm hoping you're smarter than that. We offer peace. Unity. An end to conflict. You offer slavery. Dressed up as love, but slavery nonetheless." The energy beings pulsed with what might have been consideration. "And what do you offer, human?" Elias looked out at the approaching ships, at the vast tapestry of stars beyond. "A choice. Real choice. Help us find a way to coexist that doesn't require anyone to give up their free will." The beings were silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, they began to dissipate, their forms scattering like stardust. "We will consider your words," the voice whispered as it faded. "But know this, we are not the only ones who have learned to wear appealing faces. The galaxy is full of predators, human. Some of them are far less benevolent than we." The rescue ships docked just as the last of the beings vanished. Elias sat in a pilot's chair, exhausted but alive, wondering if he had just saved the galaxy or doomed it. Only time would tell. The final gambit. 6 months had passed since Elias's encounter with the Felidar energy beings, and the galaxy had changed. The great invasion had stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving behind scattered reports of cute creatures simply vanishing from conquered worlds. The Droven Empire slowly rebuilt, their warriors recovering from what historians would later call the Great Purring. Elias had become something of a legend, the human who stared down cosmic cuteness and lived to tell about it. But legends, he was learning, came with a price. He sat in the dimly lit cantina on Station Omega 7, nursing a drink that tasted like regret and trying to ignore the stares of other patrons. His table was in the corner, back to the wall, with clear sightlines to all exits. Old habits died hard. Captain Trent. A young voice interrupted his brooding. Elias looked up to see a teenage girl with bright eyes and an eager expression. She wore the uniform of a junior diplomatic corps, and her name tag read Ensign Sarah Kim. "Depends who's asking," Elias replied cautiously. "I'm with the Galactic Peace Initiative. We've been tasked with establishing first contact protocols with the Felidar species. We need your help." Elias nearly choked on his drink. "You want to make contact with them? After everything that happened?" "They withdrew peacefully when you showed them an alternative," Sarah said, sliding into the seat across from him. "The Council believes they can be reasoned with. The Council is made up of idiots who've never had their free will nearly dissolved by weaponized adorableness." Sarah's expression didn't waver. "Nevertheless, we have a mission. 3 months ago, we received a transmission from the Felidar homeworld. They're requesting a meeting. They specifically asked for you." Elias set down his glass with a sharp click. "No. Captain, please. This could be our chance to establish peaceful relations with one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Or it could be a trap designed to finish what they started." Sarah leaned forward, her voice urgent. The message included proof of their sincerity. "They've begun releasing the humans they converted. People like Marcus Chen are being returned to their original forms. That has to mean something." Despite himself, Elias felt a flicker of interest. Marcus had been haunting his thoughts for months, the broken man who had become a weapon, then a victim, then something else entirely. Where's the meeting supposed to take place? Neutral space. An abandoned research station in the Kepler Nebula. They've agreed to limit themselves to a single representative, no homeworld, no cosmic presence, just one individual. And if it's another trap? Sarah's young face was grim. "Then we're probably all doomed anyway. But if there's a chance for peace." Elias was quiet for a long moment, staring into his drink. Finally, he sighed. "When do we leave?" The journey to the Kepler Nebula took 3 days aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony. Elias spent most of the time reviewing intelligence reports and trying to prepare for what might be another encounter with beings whose very existence challenged the concept of free will. The abandoned research station was a relic from the early days of galactic exploration, a small facility that had once studied nebular phenomena before being mothballed decades ago. It drifted in the colorful mists of the nebula like a metal tomb. "Sensors show one life form aboard," reported the ship's captain. "Human-sized, but the readings are unusual." Elias and Sarah suited up and took a shuttle to the station's docking bay. The artificial gravity was still functional, but the air was stale and cold. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls as they made their way to the station's main laboratory. The Felidar representative was waiting for them. It looked like a human woman in her 30s, with silver hair and impossibly blue eyes. She wore a simple white dress and stood with the casual confidence of someone who had nothing to fear from the universe. "Captain Trent," she said, her voice carrying the faint echo of that cosmic purring. "Thank you for coming." "You're not really human," Elias said, his hand resting on his sidearm. "No," she agreed. "But this form allows us to communicate more effectively. You might call me an ambassador." Sarah stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over. We're here to discuss the possibility of peaceful coexistence between our species. The ambassador tilted her head, studying them both. Your species is fascinating. Most beings, when offered perfect peace and contentment, accept readily. But humans, you fight even when fighting serves no purpose. We call it free will, Elias said dryly. We call it chaos, the ambassador replied. But perhaps that is not entirely a bad thing. She moved to the laboratory's main viewport, gazing out at the swirling nebula. We have been observers of galactic civilization for millennia. We have watched species rise and fall, create and destroy, love and hate. Always, we believed that suffering could be eliminated through unity of purpose. By making everyone love you, Sarah said. By making everyone love peace, the ambassador corrected. But your resistance has shown us something we had not considered, that the struggle itself may be what gives life meaning. Elias felt a chill. What are you saying? The ambassador turned back to them, her blue eyes sad and ancient. We are saying goodbye, Captain Trent. The Felidar are leaving this galaxy. Leaving? Sarah's voice was shocked. But why? Because we have learned that we cannot save a universe that does not wish to be saved. And perhaps that is as it should be. She approached Elias, stopping just out of arm's reach. You showed us that choice has value, even when it leads to pain. We will remember this lesson as we search for other galaxies, other forms of life to study. What about the people you converted? The ones you're supposedly returning to normal? They are free to choose their own paths now. Some have asked to come with us. Others, like your Marcus Chen, have chosen to remain and rebuild their lives. The ambassador smiled sadly. Free will, as you called it. A soft chime echoed through the station, the sound of a ship departing. Through the viewport, Elias could see a craft of impossible beauty rising from the nebula's depths, its hull seeming to be made of crystallized starlight. That's it? Elias asked. You're just leaving. The ambassador began to shimmer, her human form becoming translucent. Not all endings are battles, Captain. Sometimes wisdom is knowing when to walk away. Wait, Sarah called out. What about the other species you mentioned? The ones who are less benevolent than you? The ambassador paused in her dissolution. A warning, then, before we go. The galaxy is vast, and consciousness takes many forms. Some wear faces of beauty, others of terror. Some offer love, others demand worship. Be watchful, humans. Your resistance to us may not work against all who would seek to control you. Her form grew fainter, but her voice remained clear. And Captain Trent, thank you. In showing us the value of choice, you have given us the greatest gift of all, the freedom to choose our own path, even if it leads us away from everything we thought we wanted. The ambassador faded completely, leaving only a faint scent of ozone and starlight. Through the viewport, the beautiful ship accelerated beyond the nebula's edge, carrying the Felidar toward distant stars and unknown destinies. Sarah broke the silence first. Do you think they'll really stay away? Elias was quiet for a long moment, watching the last traces of the Felidar ship disappear into the cosmic dark. I think they meant what they said. But she was right about one thing, there are other threats out there. Other species that might not be as reasonable. They made their way back to the shuttle in contemplative silence. As they prepared to depart, Elias took one last look at the abandoned research station. It would drift here for years to come, a monument to a meeting that had prevented a war and perhaps saved the concept of free will itself. Captain? Sarah asked as they settled into their seats. What do we do now? Elias started the shuttle's engines, feeling the familiar vibration of controlled power. Now. We go home. We rebuild. We prepare. He looked out at the vast expanse of stars ahead of them. And we stay vigilant. The universe is full of wonders and horrors, and sometimes they're the same thing. The shuttle emerged from the nebula and began its journey back to civilized space. Behind them, the colorful mists swirled and danced, keeping their secrets. Ahead lay the galaxy they had helped to save, a galaxy that would remain free to make its own choices, for better or worse. As they flew toward home, Elias allowed himself a small smile. He had started this adventure trying to save one small kitten. Instead, he had helped save the freedom of countless billions. It wasn't the ending he had expected, but it was the one the galaxy needed. In the depths of space, ancient beings moved toward new frontiers, carrying with them a hard-won wisdom about the nature of choice and the price of freedom. And somewhere in the recovered territories of the former Droven Empire, Marcus Chen was learning to be human again, one difficult day at a time. The age of cuteness was over. The age of choice would continue. The end.